Picture this moment. A crystal wine glass tilting in slow motion. Expensive Bordeaux cascading through the air, landing on a man's suit jacket with a violent splash of deep red. And then, laughter. Not nervous laughter, not apologetic laughter, but the kind of cruel, dismissive laughter that says, "You don't belong here." The man standing there, wine dripping from his clothes, doesn't flinch, doesn't raise his voice, doesn't even look angry. He simply stands there with a dignity that seems almost impossible under the circumstances. But here's what the laughing family doesn't know yet. Here's what's about to turn their entire world upside down. That man they just humiliated. The one they assumed was some nobody who wandered into the wrong event. He holds their son's entire future in his hands. And in less than 24 hours, one decision from this man will cost them everything they've been working toward, everything they've paid for, everything they thought money could buy. This is the story of how one moment of cruelty destroyed a legacy, how assumptions became consequences, and how a man who built an empire from nothing reminded the world that some things money simply cannot purchase. Let's rewind. Let's start from the beginning, because the full story, it's so much more devastating than you can imagine. His name is Dominic Hayes, and if you know anything about classical piano, about the world of elite music education, you know that name carries weight. Dominic Hayes is the founder and CEO of the Thornhill Conservatory in Manhattan. Not just any music school, not just another prestigious academy. Thornhill is the institution, the place where future legends are made, where the acceptance rate hovers around 2%, where getting in means more than a Juilliard acceptance in today's classical music world. Students from 60 countries apply every year. Thousands of hopefuls, hundreds of prodigies, and Thornhill accepts only 40. 40 students per year out of thousands. The waiting list alone could fill concert halls. But here's what makes Thornhill different. Here's what makes Dominic Hayes different. He built it from nothing. Dominic didn't inherit wealth, didn't have connections, didn't come from a musical dynasty or a family with a concert hall named after them. He came from the west side of Detroit, from a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than piano recitals, where dreams were supposed to stay dreams. We'll get to that story, to how a kid from the streets became the gatekeeper of classical music's most elite institution. But first, let's talk about tonight. The Plaza Hotel, Manhattan, a charity gala that costs $5,000 a plate just to attend. Dominic is here, but not for the reasons you might think. He's not here to schmooze, not here to network. He's here because Thornhill received a generous donation to fund scholarships, and the donor asked him to attend to see the community impact. Dominic Hayes dressed simply for the event. A good suit, yes, but not the kind of peacocking luxury that fills this room. No designer labels screaming for attention. No watch that costs more than a car. Just a man in a clean, well-fitted suit. And in a room full of people spending more on their outfit than most people make in a month, that simplicity made him stand out for all the wrong reasons. To some people in that room, Dominic Hayes looked like he didn't belong. Now let's talk about the family that would make the biggest mistake of their lives tonight. Christopher Whitmore, 62 years old. Real estate developer. Net worth hovering around $800 million. Christopher built his empire the old-fashioned way, through ruthless business practices, strategic bankruptcies, and knowing exactly whose palms to grease in city government. His developments dot the Manhattan skyline. His name is on buildings from Chelsea to the Upper East Side. He's the kind of man who measures his worth in zeros and measures other people's worth the same way. Then there's his wife, Victoria. Victoria Whitmore, 58, whose entire identity revolves around social standing, who treats life like a competition where the scoreboard is invitations, charity board positions, and being photographed at the right events. She collects status symbols the way some people collect art. The right clubs, the right friends, the right tables in the right restaurants, and their son Ashton, 22 years old, the product of 2 decades of being told he's special, that he's destined for greatness, that the world exists to give him what he wants. Ashton Whitmore plays piano, not exceptionally, not with the kind of passion that makes people stop and listen, but competently enough that his parents convinced themselves he was a prodigy. They hired the best teachers money could buy. They put him in competitions where donations ensured favorable results. They built a narrative that their son was a musical genius. And now Ashton wants what he's always gotten, whatever he desires. He wants into Thornhill Conservatory. Not because he loves music with the kind of fire that can't be extinguished. Not because he has something unique to say through his instrument. But because Thornhill is the most prestigious. Because acceptance means status. Because he wants to say he goes there. And the Whitmores, they've already pledged $5 million to Thornhill. $5 million they believe will purchase their son's acceptance. In their world, that's how things work. You want something, you pay for it. Tonight, all 3 Whitmores are at this gala. Christopher networking, Victoria posturing, Ashton drinking too much expensive champagne and feeling like he owns the world. What they don't know yet is that the man who will decide their son's fate is standing 20 feet away. And in about 3 minutes, Ashton is going to make sure that decision doesn't go the way they planned. The bar area. 11:15 p.m. Dominic Hayes standing alone, checking his phone. Planning to leave soon. The speeches are over. The networking is winding down. He's fulfilled his obligation. Then he hears it. "Excuse me. Excuse me." Dominic looks up. Ashton Whitmore. 3 champagnes deep, swaying slightly, looking at Dominic with the kind of contempt that only comes from profound entitlement. You lost Buddy Ashton's words slur slightly. Valet parking is around back, or if you're looking for the service entrance that's on 58th. Dominic processes this calmly. He's dealt with this before, more times than he can count. "I'm a guest," Dominic says simply. Polite, not defensive, just a statement of fact. Ashton laughs. That particular laugh. The kind that's designed to humiliate. "A guest. Here." He looks Dominic up and down. Whose guest who invited you now other people are starting to notice. Starting to turn and watch. Dominic remains composed. "I was invited by the Rothstein Foundation for the scholarship program." The scholarship program. Ashton repeats it like it's the punchline to a joke. "Right. So you're here on charity. Got it." Dominic's jaw tightens slightly, but his voice stays level. "If you'll excuse me." No, wait." Ashton steps closer. Too close. Invading space the way drunk people do when they've lost all sense of boundaries. "I want to understand this. They're giving scholarships to people like you, and you're here celebrating that people like you." Those 3 words hang in the air. Dominic knows exactly what they mean. He's heard variations of them his entire life. "Young man," Dominic says quietly, "I think you've had too much to drink. I'm going to suggest you find your friends and don't tell me what to do." Ashton's voice rises. "You don't get to tell me anything. You don't even belong here." And that's when Christopher and Victoria Whitmore notice the commotion. They walk over, and here's where everything accelerates. Victoria sizes up the situation immediately, her son confronting someone who clearly doesn't fit their social circle. And instead of de-escalating, instead of showing any shred of decency, she chooses her son's side. "Is there a problem here?" Victoria asks. But she's looking at Dominic when she says it, as if he's the problem. "No problem," Dominic says. "Still calm, still composed. Your son seems to think I'm not supposed to be here." "Well," Victoria looks Dominic up and down with barely concealed disdain. "This is a very exclusive event. $5,000 a plate." "Perhaps there was some confusion about there's no confusion," Dominic interrupts gently. "I was invited. I'm here legitimately, and I'd just like to be left alone." Christopher Whitmore steps in now, puffing his chest slightly. "Listen, friend, I don't know who you think you are, but this is a private event for serious donors, and I understand that," Dominic says, "which is why I'm here." Ashton laughs again. "You, a serious donor? What did you donate your lunch money?" And that's when it happens. Ashton, emboldened by his parents' presence, feeling invincible in his privilege, picks up his wine glass. "You know what Ashton says? I think you need to cool off." And he tips the entire glass of red wine directly onto Dominic's suit jacket. The Bordeaux splashes across the gray fabric. Deep red spreading like blood, dripping onto Dominic's shirt, staining his tie. For a moment, everything freezes. The nearby conversations stop. People turn to look. Someone gasps. And Victoria Whitmore. She laughs. Not a shocked laugh. Not a nervous reaction. But a genuine laugh, like she just watched the funniest thing she's ever seen. "Oh my God, Ashton," she says through her laughter. His face. Christopher tries to hide a smirk, tries to look stern, but there's amusement in his eyes. Dominic Hayes stands there, wine dripping from his clothes, and he doesn't move. He doesn't shout, doesn't grab Ashton, doesn't make a scene. He simply reaches into his pocket, pulls out a handkerchief, and begins calmly wiping the wine from his jacket. "You're going to regret this," Dominic says quietly. Not a threat, just a statement of fact. Ashton laughs louder. "Regret it? What are you going to do? Sue me, good luck with that, buddy. My dad has lawyers that'll bury you." Victoria touches Ashton's arm. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's leave this person to clean himself up. Some people just don't belong in certain spaces." And the three of them walk away, laughing, actually laughing as they leave Dominic Hayes standing there wine-stained and humiliated in front of dozens of New York's elite. But here's what the Whitmores didn't notice in their amusement. The way some people's faces changed when they saw Dominic. The way a few guests suddenly looked horrified. The way one woman whispered urgently to her husband, "Oh my God, do they know who that is?" The way the event coordinator, who'd been across the room, suddenly went pale and started rushing toward the stage, because in approximately 90 seconds, everyone in this room is going to learn exactly who Dominic Hayes is, and the Whitmore family's entire world is about to implode. The stage lights come up. The event coordinator, Margaret Chen, who organized this entire gala, steps up to the microphone with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. She's just watched what happened at the bar. She knows what's coming. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret's voice cuts through the murmur of conversation. "If I could have your attention, please." The room settles. People return to their tables. The Whitmores slide into their seats, still chuckling about the incident. Victoria whispers something to Christopher. Ashton orders another drink. "We've had a wonderful evening celebrating the arts," Margaret continues, "and the generosity in this room has made it possible to fund scholarships that will change lives." Polite applause. But I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone special. Someone who embodies everything we're celebrating tonight. Someone who built opportunity from nothing and now dedicates his life to creating those same opportunities for others. Christopher Whitmore is half listening, still thinking about a business deal he's closing next week. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage the man who made this scholarship program possible. The founder and CEO of the Thornhill Conservatory, a man who needs no introduction in the classical music world, Dominic Hayes. The applause starts, and Christopher Whitmore's champagne glass stops halfway to his lips, his brain processing what he just heard. Dominic Hayes, CEO, Thornhill Conservatory. The champagne glass slips from his fingers, crashes to the floor, shatters. But Christopher doesn't notice. He's staring at the stage where Dominic Hayes, the same man his son just poured wine on, the same man his wife just mocked, is walking up to accept recognition. Victoria hasn't processed it yet. She's looking at her husband in confusion. "Christopher, what's wrong? You look like you've seen, And then she sees him, Dominic Hayes, on stage, shaking hands with Margaret Chen, wine stains still visible on his jacket under the lights. The color drains from Victoria's face so completely she looks like she might faint. "No," she whispers. "No, no, no, that can't be." "That's him," Christopher says, his voice hollow. "That's Dominic Hayes." Ashton still doesn't get it. "So, some music school administrator. Who cares?" Christopher grabs his son's arm so hard, Ashton winces. "You idiot! You absolute idiot!" On stage, Dominic is speaking now. His voice is warm, genuine, filling the room with the kind of natural authority that comes from someone who's earned their position rather than bought it. "Thank you, Margaret. Thank you all for being here tonight. When I founded Thornhill 15 years ago, I had a simple vision: create a place where talent matters more than privilege, where a kid from Detroit or Des Moines has the same chance as a kid from the Upper East Side." The speech continues, but Christopher Whitmore isn't listening to the words. He's doing math. Terrible, devastating math. $5 million. They donated $5 million to Thornhill, money that's already been transferred, money that was supposed to guarantee Ashton's acceptance. And Ashton's audition results, still pending. Final decision made by the CEO, made by the man currently on stage with wine stains on his jacket, made by the man they just humiliated. Victoria Christopher's voice is shaking. "We need to leave, right now." But Victoria is frozen, staring at the stage, understanding finally crashing over her like a wave. "Oh God," she breathes. "Oh my God, Christopher, what did Ashton?" Ashton finally understands enough to look worried. "Dad, what's happening? Why does it matter if he runs some music school?" Christopher turns to his son with an expression of pure rage mixed with panic. "It matters," he hisses, "because you just assaulted the man who decides whether you get into Thornhill. The man we've been courting for 6 months. The man we donated $5 million to impress." The reality hits Ashton like a physical blow. His face goes white. "No. No, Dad. I didn't know. I thought he was just some what?" Ashton Christopher's voice is acid. "Some random black man at a charity gala who you assumed didn't belong. Is that what you thought?" People at nearby tables are starting to stare at the Whitmore family now, starting to put the pieces together, starting to realize they're watching a social execution in real time. The speech ends to thunderous applause. Dominic Hayes walks off the stage, and the Whitmores watch him like condemned prisoners watching the executioner sharpen his blade. "We have to apologize," Victoria says urgently. "Right now, immediately, before he, what?" Christopher snaps. Before he makes the decision he's probably already making in his head, "Victoria, our son poured wine on him. You laughed. I stood there and let it happen. So, what do we do?" Victoria's voice cracks. Just give up. Let Ashton's future. Ashton's future. Christopher laughs bitterly. Ashton's future was over the moment that wine hit Hayes's jacket. But Victoria isn't ready to accept that. She's a fighter. She's navigated social circles her entire life. She knows how to smooth things over, how to make problems disappear. No, she says firmly. No, we can fix this. We have to fix this. We'll increase the donation. 10 million, 15 million, whatever it takes. Christopher looks at his wife like she's lost her mind. You think this is about money? You think Dominic Hayes gives a damn about our money after what just happened? Everyone cares about money, Victoria insists. Everyone has a price. Mom's right, Ashton says, desperately grabbing onto this hope like a drowning man grabbing driftwood. We just need to offer enough. We can fix this. Christopher wants to believe them. Wants to believe that money can solve this problem the way it solved every other problem in their lives. But he saw Dominic Hayes' face, saw the quiet dignity, the complete lack of anger or fear. That's not the face of a man who can be bought. Still, what choice do they have? Fine, Christopher says. We try. We apologize, we grovel if we have to, and we see if throwing money at this can make it go away. They scan the room looking for Dominic. He's near the exit, talking to Margaret Chen and 2 other board members, getting ready to leave. The Whitmores approach like supplicants approaching a king. Christopher reaches them first. Mr. Hayes, he says, his voice carefully controlled. Christopher Whitmore. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Dominic turns, looks at Christopher with an expression that gives away nothing. Mr. Whitmore, Dominic says neutrally. I believe we've met already. About 15 minutes ago. The words land like a slap. Victoria steps forward, her society smile plastered on but trembling at the edges. Mr. Hayes, please, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. My son, he'd been drinking. He didn't realize who you were. I see. Dominic interrupts quietly. So if he had known who I was, he wouldn't have poured wine on me. The question hangs there. Victoria's mouth opens and closes. There's no good answer to that. Mr. Hayes. Christopher tries again. We would very much like to speak with you. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting. At your convenience. We'd like to discuss. I know what you'd like to discuss, Dominic says. And I think we both know this isn't the time or place. Of course, Christopher agrees quickly. Tomorrow, your office. We can. My assistant will reach out to schedule something, Dominic says. Not yes, not no, just a deflection. Ashton steps forward now, and you can see he's been coached by his mother. He's trying to look contrite. Mr. Hayes, I want to apologize. What I did was inexcusable. I was drunk and stupid, and I'm so sorry. Dominic studies Ashton for a long moment. You're sorry you poured wine on me? Dominic asks. Or you're sorry you poured wine on someone important? Ashton flounders. I'm sorry I did it at all, but especially I understand, Dominic says, cutting him off. You're sorry you got caught doing something you probably do to people you consider beneath you all the time. The accuracy of that statement hits like a hammer. That's not Ashton's starts, but he can't finish because they all know it's exactly what happened. Dominic nods to the group. If you'll excuse me, I need to get home. It's been a long night. He starts to walk away. Victoria calls after him, desperation cracking her voice. Mr. Hayes, please. Ashton's audition. We know you haven't made a final decision yet. We're prepared to increase our donation significantly. 10 million, 12 million. Please just give us a chance to... Dominic stops, turns back. And when he speaks, his voice is so quiet, everyone has to lean in to hear it. Mrs. Whitmore, has it occurred to you that maybe, just maybe, There are some things money can't buy. He doesn't wait for an answer. Dominic Hayes walks out of the Plaza Hotel, leaving the Whitmore family standing there in the wreckage of their own making. The car ride home is silent. The kind of silence that's louder than screaming. They're in Christopher's Mercedes S-Class gliding through Manhattan streets, and nobody speaks for a full 10 minutes. Finally, Ashton breaks. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who he was. Christopher doesn't take his eyes off the road." "That's the problem, Ashton. You didn't need to know who he was to not pour wine on him." "I was drunk." "You're always drunk," Victoria snaps. "And you're always rude to people you think are beneath you. This is just the first time it actually cost you something." Ashton's voice cracks. "So what?" "That's it. I don't get into Thornhill." "You didn't get into Thornhill the moment you picked up that wine glass," Christopher says flatly. "But the donation..." "The donation means nothing," Christopher interrupts. "Dominic Hayes isn't going to accept our son after that." "Would you silence again?" Then Victoria's phone buzzes. She looks at it, and her face goes even paler. What Christopher asks. "Melissa Rothstein just texted me," Victoria says quietly. "Someone filmed it. The whole thing. It's already on social media, what Ashton grabs for her phone." "Let me see." Victoria pulls up the video. There it is. 45 seconds of Ashton confronting Dominic. The audio is muffled, but you can hear enough. You can hear people like you. You can see the wine being poured. You can see Victoria laughing. And the caption, "Rich Kid Assaults Thornhill Conservatory CEO Dominic Hayes at Charity Gala." Guess who's not getting into music school now, karma entitled Winegate. The video already has 50,000 views, and it's been up for less than an hour. Ashton watches it, his hands shaking. "Oh God? Oh God, everyone's going to see this. Everyone's going to know. Everyone already knows," Victoria says, scrolling through her phone. "It's trending. Winegate. We're trending Ashton." Christopher pulls the car over, just stops in the middle of Central Park West and puts his head in his hands. 15 years, he says quietly. 15 years of building your profile, Ashton. Private lessons with the best teachers. Competitions. Recitals. Building the narrative that you were a prodigy. Getting you ready for this moment. For Thornhill. He looks at his son in the rearview mirror. And you destroyed it all in 30 seconds because you couldn't resist being cruel to someone you thought didn't matter. Ashton is crying now. "Dad, please, there has to be something we can do. We can't just..." "There's nothing," Christopher says. "There's nothing we can do. Dominic Hayes holds all the cards, and we just gave him every reason to play them against us." Victoria is reading comments on the video now. "They're destroying us," she whispers. "Listen to this. This is what privilege looks like. These people think they can buy their way into anything and treat regular people like garbage." Another one. "Dominic Hayes is a hero for staying composed. I hope he rejects that entitled brat." She keeps scrolling. "The mom laughing is almost worse than the kid pouring the wine. These people are disgusting. I hope Thornhill bans the whole family. Rich people really think they can do anything and face no consequences." The comments go on and on. Thousands of people weighing in, and they're all saying the same thing. The Whitmores are the villains in this story, and Dominic Hayes is the hero. Ashton pulls out his own phone now, opens Instagram. His DMs are flooded, friends asking what happened, acquaintances making jokes, people he went to prep school with piling on. But it's the other messages that make his blood run cold. Messages from Berklee College of Music. "In light of recent events, we're reconsidering your application status. From Manhattan School of Music. We need to discuss your pending enrollment." From 3 other prestigious programs he'd applied to as backups. They all saw the video, and they're all reconsidering. Dad Ashton's voice is barely a whisper now. It's not just Thornhill. Everyone's pulling back. Christopher doesn't respond. He starts the car again and drives them home in silence. When they get to their penthouse on 5th Avenue, Victoria pours herself a straight vodka. Christopher goes to his office and closes the door. And Ashton sits in his room watching the view count on the video climb higher and higher. 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. By morning, it will be over 1 million. By the end of the week, it will be 50 million. But right now, in this moment, all Ashton can think about is what Dominic Hayes said. You're going to regret this. He was right, and the regret is only just beginning. To understand why this moment matters so much, we need to go back, way back, to a very different world than the Plaza Hotel and $5,000 a plate charity galas. We need to go to Detroit. West Side, 1978. Dominic Hayes was born in a neighborhood where survival was the primary goal, and dreams were considered luxuries nobody could afford. His father left before Dominic was born, just walked away, and never looked back. One more statistic in a community full of them. So it was just Dominic and his mother, Patricia. Patricia Hayes worked 3 jobs. 3. She cleaned offices from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. She worked retail from 9 to 5. And 3 nights a week, she cleaned rooms at a hotel downtown. She did this so they could keep their 1-bedroom apartment, so Dominic could eat, so they could survive. There was no money for extras, no vacations, no new clothes. Christmas meant maybe one small gift if Patricia could scrape together enough. But Patricia Hayes had standards. She made sure Dominic went to school every day, made sure his homework got done, made sure he understood that education was the only way out of the cycle they were in. You're smart, baby, she'd tell him. Smarter than anyone I know. You're going to do something with that brain. You're going to be someone. Dominic believed her because she believed it with such fierce conviction that doubt seemed impossible. When Dominic was 7 years old, something happened that changed everything. The community center on their block had a piano, an old upright that was probably worth about $200, out of tune, missing some keys, covered in scratches and water stains. Someone donated it years ago, and it just sat there in the corner of the main room where kids played after school. Most kids ignored it, but Dominic was drawn to it. He'd sit at the bench during after-school hours and press keys, listening to the sounds, trying to make patterns, trying to make music out of the discordant notes. The community center director, a woman named Mrs. Johnson, noticed. "You like that piano, honey?" she asked him one day. 7-year-old Dominic nodded enthusiastically. "I like how it sounds. I wish I knew how to make it sound better." Mrs. Johnson smiled. "You want to learn how to play?" Dominic's eyes went wide. "Can I?" Mrs. Johnson had a niece who taught piano. She called in a favor. Got her niece to come volunteer a couple hours a week. And Dominic Hayes started learning piano. The talent was obvious immediately. Not just competent, not just quick to learn, exceptional. The kind of natural ability that makes teachers stop and recalibrate their entire approach. By age 8, Dominic was playing pieces that took most students years to master. By age 9, he was composing his own music. By age 10, Mrs. Johnson was pulling aside anyone who would listen, saying, "This boy is special, really special. He needs proper training." But proper training costs money. Real piano lessons from real teachers. $50 an hour at minimum, more for the good ones. Patricia Hayes didn't have $50 extra in a month, let alone for weekly lessons. The volunteer teacher did what she could, gave Dominic free lessons twice a week, brought him books and sheet music she bought with her own money. But she knew it wasn't enough. "He needs to be at a real conservatory," she told Mrs. Johnson. He needs teachers who can challenge him. He's outgrowing everything I can teach him. Mrs. Johnson organized a fundraiser, got the community to chip in. They raised $300. It was something. It helped. But it wasn't nearly enough for the kind of training Dominic needed. Still, Dominic practiced. Every day after school, he was at that piano for hours, practicing scales, learning pieces, losing himself in the music. It was the only time he felt like he was somewhere else. Someone else. When his fingers were on those keys, he wasn't a poor kid from a dangerous neighborhood. He wasn't someone who wore the same 3 outfits in rotation because that's all they had. He was just music, pure and simple. And he was good at it. Really good. Patricia would come pick him up after her shift at the retail store, and she'd stand in the doorway listening to her son play. Sometimes she'd cry, because she could hear it too. The gift, the talent. And she knew she couldn't afford to nurture it properly. But she tried. Every extra dollar she could scrape together went to music books, to getting the community center piano tuned once a year, to buying Dominic nicer clothes for his occasional recitals at the center. Someday she'd tell him, "You're going to play in concert halls. You're going to be somebody, I know it." And Dominic would nod and smile. But inside he wasn't sure, because how do you get from here to there? How do you go from a broken-down piano in a Detroit community center to the stages his mother dreamed of? The answer, he thought, was getting into a real program, a real conservatory where they could train him properly. So when Dominic was 15, he decided to audition for the Michigan Youth Symphony Advanced Piano Program. It was prestigious, selective, but they did offer some scholarship positions for talented students who couldn't afford the tuition. This was his chance. Patricia helped him prepare. They practiced his audition pieces until they were perfect. They saved up to buy him one decent outfit for the audition. And on the day of his audition, Patricia took the day off work, losing a day's pay they couldn't afford to lose, to drive Dominic across town to the conservatory building. It was the first time Dominic had been inside a building like that. Marble floors, high ceilings, oil paintings on the walls. The kind of place that radiated wealth and tradition. Every other kid auditioning showed up in expensive clothes with expensive instruments and parents who looked like they summered in the Hamptons. Dominic showed up in his thrift store suit with his mother, who smelled like the cleaning products she'd used at work that morning. They didn't fit, and everyone could tell. The looks they got, the way people subtly moved away from them in the waiting area, the way the receptionist spoke slower when addressing Patricia as if she might not understand English properly. Dominic felt it all, but he pushed it down, because he could play. That's what mattered. His talent would speak louder than his zip code, at least that's what he told himself. When Dominic's name was called, he walked into the audition room with his head high. 3 judges sat behind a long table, all white, all wearing expressions that ranged from bored to mildly curious. The head judge glanced at his paperwork. "Dominic Hayes," he said. "Not a question. Just stating a fact. From West Side." "Yes, sir," Dominic responded. A look passed between 2 of the judges. Quick, but Dominic caught it. "All right," the head judge said. "Let's hear what you've prepared." Dominic sat at the piano. It was a beautiful instrument, a Steinway Grand, probably worth more than every possession his family owned combined. He put his fingers on the keys, and he played. Mozart's Piano Sonata, number 16 in C major, a piece he'd practiced 1,000 times on that broken community center piano. But here on this instrument, with its perfect tuning and responsive keys, the music soared. Dominic poured everything into it. Every hour of practice, every dream, every hope. When he finished, There was silence. He looked up at the judges. The head judge was writing something. Didn't look up. One of the other judges, a woman in her 50s, spoke first. "That was competent," she said. "Though I noticed some technical issues with your hand position. Where did you say you've been studying?" "At the community center, ma'am," Dominic answered. "I have a volunteer teacher who I see," she interrupted. "That explains some of the unconventional technique." The third judge, a younger man, leaned forward. "Have you considered other musical paths, jazz, perhaps, or contemporary music?" Dominic blinked. I love classical piano. That's what I want to study." "Of course," the man said. "It's just that sometimes students find more success in genres that are perhaps more suited to their background." There it was. Coded language, polite racism dressed up as career advice. The head judge finally looked up. "Mr. Hayes, you clearly have some natural ability, but this program is extremely competitive. We're looking for students who not only have talent, but who have had the kind of rigorous training that prepares them for this level of study." "I can work hard," Dominic said. "I can learn. That's why I want to be here." "Hard work is admirable," the judge said. "But we have students who've been training since age 4 with world-class instructors, students who've already won international competitions, students who come from musical families with generations of classical training." He didn't say it explicitly. He didn't have to. "You don't belong here. We'll let you know our decision in 2 weeks, the head judge said. "Thank you for auditioning." Dominic stood on shaking legs. "Thank you for your time," he managed to say. He walked out of that room knowing exactly what the decision would be. And he was right. 2 weeks later, the rejection letter arrived. "While we appreciate your interest in our program, we feel that your current level of training does not meet the standards necessary for admission. We encourage you to continue your musical studies and wish you the best in your future endeavors." Form letter, probably sent to dozens of other rejections. But for Dominic, it was devastating. Patricia found him crying in his room, the letter crumpled in his fist. "Baby, what happened?" she asked. Through his tears, Dominic told her. About the audition. About the judge's comments. About the rejection. "They didn't even really listen," he said. "They saw where I'm from and decided before I played a single note that I didn't belong." Patricia held her son while he cried. And then she said something that Dominic would remember for the rest of his life. "They're wrong," she said fiercely. "You hear me, they are wrong. You have more talent in your pinky finger than those judges have in their entire bodies, and someday you're going to prove it. You're going to be so successful that people like them will be begging for your approval." "How?" Dominic asked. "How am I supposed to do that when every door is closed?" "You find another door," Patricia said simply. "Or you build one yourself." At 15, Dominic didn't fully understand what that meant. But he would. Over the next 3 years, Dominic worked harder than he'd ever worked. He couldn't afford private lessons, but he found every free resource available. He watched videos at the library. He studied music theory in books. He practiced 6 hours a day on that community center piano. His volunteer teacher did everything she could to help. She called in more favors, got other musicians to work with Dominic occasionally. And when Dominic was 18, he applied for every scholarship, every program, every opportunity he could find. Some rejected him outright. Some gave him auditions where he faced the same subtle prejudices as before. But a blessed few, saw his talent for what it was. He got into a state university music program on a full scholarship. Not the prestigious conservatory he'd dreamed of, but a real program with real teachers. It was a start. Dominic threw himself into his studies. He worked 3 part-time jobs while carrying a full course load. He practiced until his fingers bled. And he got better. Much better. By his sophomore year, he was winning competitions. By his junior year, he was performing professionally. By his senior year, he'd been accepted to a graduate program at Eastman School of Music, one of the top conservatories in the country, with a full fellowship. He was 22 years old, and he was finally where he was supposed to be. But he never forgot the judges who dismissed him. Never forgot the look in their eyes when they saw where he came from. Never forgot the feeling of being told he didn't belong. Dominic Hayes became a successful concert pianist. He performed with major symphonies. He recorded albums. He won prestigious awards. By age 35, he'd achieved everything he'd dreamed of as a kid at that community center piano. But something was missing. Every time he performed, every time he was backstage at a major venue, he noticed something. The lack of diversity. The same type of people filling the same type of roles. Classical music had a diversity problem. And it started at the conservatory level. The prestigious programs that fed into professional orchestras and solo careers were overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly wealthy. Not because there weren't talented black and brown kids out there, but because those kids faced the same barriers Dominic had faced. The subtle racism, the assumptions about their backgrounds, the belief that classical music belonged to a certain class of people. And Dominic Hayes decided to do something about it. At age 40, he made a decision that shocked everyone who knew him. He walked away from his performing career, at the height of his success, at the peak of his earning potential. He walked away because he had a different vision. He was going to build a conservatory, a real one. World-class facilities, world-class faculty. But with one crucial difference. Admission would be based purely on talent, not on who your parents were, not on how much money you had, not on your last name or your connections. Pure, unfiltered, talent. People told him he was crazy. You can't fund a conservatory without wealthy donors, they said. You need families who can pay full tuition. You need people with connections. Dominic didn't listen. He took every dollar he'd saved from his performing career. He got loans. He found investors who believed in his vision. And in 2010, Thornhill Conservatory opened its doors. The first class was 40 students. 20 of them were on full scholarship. Students from Detroit, from Atlanta, from rural Montana, and inner-city Los Angeles. Kids who had the talent, but not the pedigree. And Dominic made them a promise. Here you belong, he told them on the first day. Here your talent speaks louder than your zip code. Here you're going to learn from the best teachers and you're going to work harder than you've ever worked. And when you leave here, you're going to be undeniable. He was right. That first class produced students who went on to win international competitions, join major orchestras, become soloists and teachers themselves. The second class was even better. By year 5, Thornhill had a reputation, not just as a good school, but as the school. Because Dominic's philosophy worked. When you remove barriers and focus purely on talent, when you give gifted students the resources and training they need, regardless of their ability to pay, you get extraordinary results. Word spread. The best teachers wanted to teach there. The best students wanted to study there. But here's the thing Dominic never compromised on. The merit-based admissions. Wealthy families would call, offer donations, legacy positions, all the tricks that worked at other institutions. And Dominic would say no, every single time. Your money is welcome, he'd tell them. Donate to the scholarship fund. Support students who need it. But it won't buy your child a seat. Some people respected that. Some people were offended by it. And some people like the Whitmores, thought they could find a way around it. They'd donate millions and assume that surely their child would get favorable treatment. But Dominic Hayes didn't build Thornhill to recreate the same exclusionary system he'd fought against. He built it to destroy that system. Every student who auditioned got the same treatment, the same evaluation process, the same blind audition where judges didn't see the student's name or background, just talent, that's it. And if you had it, you got in. If you didn't, no amount of money would change that. This is why the Whitmore family's assumption that their $5 million would guarantee Ashton's acceptance was always doomed to fail, because Dominic Hayes had been on the other side of that equation. He'd been the talented kid who got rejected because of who he was, rather than what he could do. And he'd built Thornhill specifically, so that would never happen to another student. So when Ashton Whitmore auditioned 2 weeks before that charity gala, he faced the same process as every other applicant, a blind audition. 3 judges who didn't know his name, and he failed. Not because the judges were biased against him, but because he simply wasn't good enough. His technique was adequate, but uninspired. His playing technically correct, but emotionally hollow. He was a student who'd been told his entire life he was exceptional, without ever being pushed to actually become exceptional. The judges scored him 6.5 out of 10. The cutoff for admission was 8.5. Ashton Whitmore didn't make the cut, but the Whitmores didn't know that yet. The final decisions hadn't been announced, and that $5 million donation was sitting there, making them confident that somehow, some way, an exception would be made. They didn't understand. They couldn't understand. That for Dominic Hayes, this wasn't just business. It was personal. Every decision he made about Thornhill was personal, because he remembered. He remembered what it felt like to be judged for everything except his ability. He remembered the doors that were closed to him. He remembered the humiliation. So when Ashton Whitmore poured wine on him at that charity gala, when Victoria and Christopher laughed, when they made it clear they saw him as someone who didn't belong in their world, it wasn't just an insult. It was history repeating itself. And Dominic Hayes was done letting history win. The morning after the charity gala, Dominic Hayes sat in his office at Thornhill Conservatory going through the final audition evaluations. 40 applicants had made it to the final round. Thornhill would accept 40 students. The math should be simple, but it never was. Because some students scored so closely that decisions came down to tiny differences. A half point here, a subjective evaluation there. These decisions would change lives. Dominic never took that responsibility lightly. His assistant, Jennifer Park, brought in his coffee. "Morning," she said. "You look tired." "Rough night," Dominic said simply. Jennifer had already seen the video. Everyone had seen the video. 50 million views now and climbing. "I saw what happened," Jennifer said carefully. "Are you okay?" Dominic gave a small smile. "I've dealt with worse. The Whitmore family has been calling every hour since 6 a.m., Jennifer said. "They want to schedule an emergency meeting. I'm sure they do. Do you want me to set something up?" Dominic considered this. "Yes. Schedule them for tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Jennifer nodded, made a note, then hesitated. "Dominic, their son. Ashton Whitmore. He's one of the final round applicants." "I know. The judges already scored him. He didn't make the cutoff." "I know that too." Jennifer looked uncomfortable. The family donated $5 million. "That doesn't change his scores," Dominic said. "I know. I wanted to make sure you knew the situation before the meeting." Dominic looked at his assistant. They'd worked together for 8 years. She knew how he operated. "Jennifer, has there ever been a time when I let a donation influence an admissions decision?" No, she admitted. Then why would I start now? Jennifer smiled slightly. I had to check. This is a unique situation. It really isn't, Dominic said. A wealthy family tried to buy their kids' way in. It happens every year. The only difference is this time they made it personal. He pulled up Ashton Whitmore's file on his computer. The audition scores were there. Detailed evaluations from 3 judges who'd heard him play without knowing his name. Judge 1, technically adequate. Lacks emotional depth, appears to be playing by rote rather than with true understanding of the music. 610. Judge 2. Competent but uninspired. Good hand technique but no passion behind the playing. Would benefit from more rigorous training before conservatory level. 6.510. Judge 3. Shows some talent but nowhere near the level we typically accept. Playing feels mechanical. No evidence of the kind of dedication and artistry we look for. 710. Average score 6.5. Well below the cutoff. And these judges didn't know who Ashton Whitmore was. Didn't know about his parents' wealth or their donation. They just heard him play and evaluated honestly. And honestly, he wasn't good enough. Pull up the wait list, Dominic told Jennifer. She did. There were 15 students on the wait list. 15 students who'd scored between 8.3 and 8.4, just below the admission cutoff, but significantly better than Ashton. Student number 7, Dominic said, pointing to the screen. Kayla Morrison, from Atlanta. What's her story? Jennifer pulled up the file. 16 years old. Taught herself piano starting at age 8 using YouTube videos and a keyboard her grandmother bought at a pawn shop. Applied for partial scholarship. Father works construction. Mother is a nurse. Audition judges said she was one of the most naturally talented students they'd heard in years. Score 8.3. Dominic read through Kayla's application essay. She wrote about growing up in a neighborhood where music programs had been cut from schools. About how she'd fallen in love with Chopin after hearing a piece in a movie. About teaching herself because lessons weren't an option financially. About how Thornhill represented everything she'd dreamed of but never thought was accessible to someone like her. This is who deserves the spot, Dominic said quietly. Not Ashton Whitmore with his expensive teachers and his parents' money. This girl who taught herself and still outperformed him by 2 full points. Jennifer nodded. So what do we tell the Whitmores tomorrow? The truth, Dominic said. Their son didn't make the cut. The admission decision stands. Their donation doesn't change that. They're going to fight it, Jennifer warned. Let them. Dominic closed the files and looked out his window at the Manhattan skyline. He'd built Thornhill to be different, to be better. And every time he made a decision like this, he reaffirmed that mission. Merit over money. Talent over privilege. Always. The next morning, the Whitmore family arrived at Thornhill Conservatory at exactly 10 a.m. They looked terrible. Christopher's usual confidence was gone, replaced by barely concealed desperation. Victoria had clearly been crying. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the puffiness around her eyes. And Ashton looked like he hadn't slept at all. Jennifer escorted them to Dominic's office. The office itself made a statement. Not ostentatious, not designed to intimidate, but every wall was covered with photographs of Thornhill students performing at Carnegie Hall, winning competitions, graduating to prestigious careers. These weren't students from wealthy families buying their way in. These were students who'd earned their place. The message was clear before anyone spoke a word. Dominic stood when they entered. Professional, courteous, but not warm. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore. Ashton. Please sit. They sat like children called to the principal's office. There was a long moment of silence. Christopher broke it first. Mr. Hayes, we owe you an apology. A sincere, heartfelt apology for what happened at the gala. There's no excuse for... You're right, Dominic interrupted quietly. There's no excuse. Christopher faltered. He'd probably prepared a whole speech. Dominic wasn't going to let him deliver it. But we want to make it right. Victoria jumped in. Her voice was shaking. We want to show you that we understand how wrong it was. How ashamed we are. Dominic just watched her, waiting. We've discussed it as a family, Victoria continued. And we want to increase our donation to Thornhill, $12 million, to fund scholarships for deserving students, to support your mission, to show you that we believe in what you're building here. She paused, clearly expecting a response. Dominic gave none, and Ashton Victoria looked at her son. Ashton wants to apologize personally. Ashton looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world, but he spoke. Mr. Hayes, what I did was inexcusable. I was drunk, yes, but that's not an excuse. I was rude and violent, and I made assumptions about you based on... He couldn't finish. Based on my race, Dominic finished for him. Ashton winced, but nodded. Yes, and I'm deeply, deeply sorry. I know I can't take it back, but I'm asking for forgiveness and a chance to prove I'm better than that moment. The room fell silent again. Dominic leaned back in his chair. Let me ask you something, Ashton, he said. How many times have you done something like that before? Never, Ashton said quickly. I've never poured wine on anyone. That's not what I asked, Dominic interrupted. I asked how many times you've been rude to someone you thought was beneath you. How many times you've made assumptions about people based on how they looked or where they came from. How many times you've treated service workers or janitors or parking attendants like they were invisible. Ashton opened his mouth, closed it, because they both knew the answer. That's what I thought Dominic said. This wasn't an isolated incident, Ashton. This was just the first time it was caught on camera, the first time it cost you something. But I can change, Ashton said desperately. I want to change. If you give me a chance, I'm not a rehabilitation program, Dominic said. I run a conservatory. Christopher leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, please. We're not asking you to forget what happened. We're asking for consideration, for our son's future. Consideration, Dominic repeated. You want me to consider your son for admission to Thornhill? Yes, Christopher said. Yes, exactly, despite his audition scores. The Whitmores exchanged glances. You know about the scores, Victoria asked. Of course I know about the scores, Dominic said. I personally review every final round candidate. And Christopher prompted. Dominic pulled up the file on his computer, turned the screen so they could see. Your son scored a 6.5, Dominic said bluntly. The cutoff for admission is 8.5. He wasn't close. The color drained from Victoria's face. But surely there's some discretion, she said. Some flexibility for special circumstances. What special circumstances would those be? Dominic asked. Our donation, Christopher said. $12 million would fund scholarships for dozens of students. That has to count for something. Dominic nodded slowly. It does count for something. It counts as a generous donation that will help deserving students afford an education here. But it doesn't buy your son a seat, Dominic finished. Those seats are earned through talent and dedication, not purchased. Mr. Hayes. Victoria's voice cracked. Please, music is Ashton's life. He's been working toward this for years. If he doesn't get into Thornhill, his entire career path. Let me stop you right there, Dominic said, his voice taking on an edge. Ashton's music career was over the moment he failed his audition. What happened at the gala just made it public. The words landed like hammer blows. But you could override the decision. Christopher tried. As CEO, you have that authority. I do. Dominic agreed. And in 15 years of running this conservatory, do you know how many times I've used that authority to accept a student who didn't meet our standards? Silence. 0, Dominic said. Not once, because the moment I do that, everything Thornhill stands for becomes meaningless. This is because of the wine, Ashton said suddenly. This is revenge. Dominic looked at him. Really looked at him. Ashton, your audition was 2 weeks before the gala. The judges scored you without knowing who you were. You failed on merit. The wine incident didn't affect your admission status because you were never going to be admitted. The truth of that hit hard. What the gala incident did, Dominic continued, was confirm that even if you had scored higher, even if you'd been borderline, you're not the kind of student I want at Thornhill. Why? Ashton asked. Because I made one mistake. Because you demonstrated exactly the kind of privilege and prejudice that Thornhill was built to combat, Dominic said. This institution exists to give opportunities to students like the one I was. Students who have the talent, but not the pedigree. Students who've been told they don't belong in classical music because of where they're from or what they look like. He stood up. You, Ashton, represent everything I've spent my career fighting against. The assumption that money can buy anything. That talent is secondary to connections. That some people belong and others don't based on their background rather than their ability. So that's it, Christopher asked. You're just rejecting him, rejecting our donation. I'm not rejecting your donation, Dominic clarified. If you want to donate $12 million to the scholarship fund with no strings attached, I'll accept it gladly. That money will help students who actually deserve to be here. But you won't accept Ashton. No. Victoria started crying. Actually crying. You're destroying his future over one mistake. Dominic's expression softened slightly. Just slightly. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply not rewarding mediocrity and poor character. There's a difference. He walked to the window. When I was 15, I auditioned for a prestigious program in Detroit. I was rejected. Not because I wasn't talented enough, but because the judges took one look at where I came from and decided I didn't belong. He turned back to face them. That rejection devastated me, but it also taught me something crucial. It taught me that the system was broken, that talent alone wasn't enough when you were fighting against prejudice and assumption. So you built a better system, Christopher said. We get it, we respect it, but you want me to break that system for your son, Dominic finished. You want me to become the very thing I built Thornhill to destroy. You want me to let privilege override merit. We're asking for compassion, Victoria said. For understanding. For a second chance. Dominic walked back to his desk. Compassion. Let me tell you about compassion. There's a 16-year-old girl named Kayla Morrison on our wait list. She taught herself piano on a pawn shop keyboard. She scored 8.3, almost 2 full points higher than your son. She's exactly the kind of student Thornhill exists to serve. He looked directly at the Whitmores. If I accept Ashton, I have to reject her. I have to tell a truly talented, deserving student that she doesn't get this opportunity because I gave her spot to someone with worse scores but better connections. He paused. That's not compassion, Mrs. Whitmore. That's cruelty. And I won't do it. After the Whitmores left, Dominic sat alone in his office for a long time. Despite everything he'd said, despite knowing he was making the right decision, part of him felt the weight of it. $12 million. He wasn't naive. He knew what that money could do, how many students it could help, how many scholarships it could fund. And there was a part of him, a small part, that wondered if he was being too rigid. Yes, Ashton failed his audition. Yes, he behaved abominably at the gala. But people change, don't they? People learn from their mistakes. Dominic walked to the window, and looked out at the students practicing in the studios below. He saw them through the windows, dedicated, focused, lost in their music. Every single one of them earned their place here. That black girl from Baltimore who'd been practicing 6 hours a day since age 7. That kid from rural Nebraska who'd driven 12 hours to audition because his family's car kept breaking down. That student whose immigrant parents worked 3 jobs to afford to send them to a competition where Thornhill Scouts noticed them. These students didn't have backup plans, didn't have trust funds, didn't have parents who could buy their way into other programs if this one didn't work out. For them, Thornhill was everything, and it was only everything because they knew it was pure. Because they knew every person here earned their seat through talent, not connections. The moment Dominic accepted Ashton Whitmore, that purity would be contaminated, and word would spread. Other wealthy families would see that exceptions could be made, that the right donation could overcome a failing audition. The floodgates would open, and everything Dominic built would crumble. No, he couldn't do it. Not for $12 million, not for any amount, because this wasn't about money. It was about principle. It was about the 15-year-old kid from Detroit who got rejected because judges couldn't see past his zip code. It was about proving that a better system was possible. It was about Kayla Morrison and every other student who deserved a chance. Dominic returned to his desk and opened his email. He wrote 2 emails. The first was to Kayla Morrison. Dear Kayla, we are pleased to inform you that a spot has opened in our incoming class. Based on your exceptional audition and your clear dedication to your craft, we would like to offer you admission to Thornhill Conservatory with a full scholarship. The second was to the Whitmore family. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, after careful consideration of all factors, I must inform you that Ashton's application to Thornhill Conservatory has been denied. This decision is final and will not be reconsidered. If you wish to donate to our scholarship fund with no conditions attached, that contribution would be welcome. Otherwise, I wish your family well. Respectfully, Dominic Hayes. He sent both emails, and he felt for the first time since that wine had splashed across his jacket at peace. The Whitmore family received the email while they were still in their car, leaving Thornhill. Christopher read it on his phone. His face went white. He rejected him, Christopher said flatly. It's official. Ashton's not getting in. Victoria grabbed the phone. Read it herself. Her hands were shaking. This can't be happening, she whispered. This can't be real. Ashton in the back seat looked numb, like he'd moved past panic into some state beyond emotion. What do we do? Victoria asked. We can't just accept this. We need to. There's nothing we can do, Christopher said. Hayes made his decision. We'll sue, Victoria said suddenly. We'll sue for discrimination or something. We donated $5 million with the understanding we can't sue Christopher, cut her off. We have no case. Ashton failed the audition. Hayes doesn't owe us anything. So that's it. Victoria's voice rose. We just give up. Let this man destroy our son's future. He didn't destroy anything, Christopher said quietly. We did. Or more specifically, Ashton did. Ashton finally spoke. Stop talking about me like I'm not here. Both parents turned to look at him. You know what the worst part is, Ashton said. I actually thought I was good. I thought I deserved to get into Thornhill. All those teachers you hired, Dad. All those competitions. You entered me in Mom. I thought I was actually talented. You are talented, Victoria insisted. I scored a 6.5, Ashton said. A 6.5. That's barely above average. I'm not a prodigy. I'm not special. I'm just some rich kid who had expensive teachers and still couldn't measure up. The truth of that hung in the air. "And now everyone knows it," Ashton continued. "That video has 50 million views. Everyone has seen me pour wine on a man who built himself up from nothing. Everyone has seen me be exactly what they think rich kids are: entitled, cruel, stupid." He looked out the window. Hayes was right. I didn't deserve to get into Thornhill. Not because of the wine thing, just because I'm not good enough. It was the first truly honest thing Ashton had said in years. Victoria wanted to comfort him, to tell him he was wrong, but she couldn't. Because deep down she knew he was right. They'd spent years building a fiction, convincing themselves that their money and connections made Ashton exceptional. But exceptional can't be bought. It has to be earned. Meanwhile, Kayla Morrison in Atlanta got an email that changed her life. She was sitting in her bedroom, really the living room of their small apartment, where her bed was set up behind a curtain, practicing on her keyboard. Her phone buzzed. She almost didn't check it. She was in the middle of a difficult passage. But something made her look. An email from Thornhill Conservatory. Her heart stopped. She'd been on the wait list. Knew it was unlikely. But she'd hoped. With shaking hands, she opened the email. "We are pleased to inform you," Kayla screamed. Actually screamed so loud her father came running from the kitchen thinking something was wrong. "Baby, what happened?" "I got in." Kayla was crying, laughing, shaking. "Dad, I got in. Thornhill accepted me. Full scholarship. I'm going to Thornhill." Her father read the email over her shoulder. And then he was crying too. Because he knew what this meant. What it represented. His daughter, who'd taught herself piano because they couldn't afford lessons, who'd practiced on a keyboard that cost $90 at a pawn shop, who'd never stopped believing despite every obstacle. She was going to one of the best music conservatories in the world. "You did it, baby," he whispered. "You actually did it." That night, Kayla called her grandmother, the one who'd bought her that first keyboard. "Grandma," she said through happy tears, "remember when you said that keyboard might take me places? I remember sugar. It took me to Thornhill. I'm going to Thornhill Conservatory." Her grandmother went silent for a moment. "Then, that man Dominic Hayes. I saw what happened to him on the news. That rich boy disrespected him." "I know," Kayla said. "And he still chose you. Still chose talent over money." "Yeah," Kayla said softly. "He did." "Then you make sure you earn it," her grandmother said. "You work harder than you've ever worked. You show them what real talent looks like. You make him proud of his decision." "I will," Kayla promised. "I absolutely will. 2 families, 2 emails, 2 completely different futures. All because one man refused to compromise his principles. All because Dominic Hayes remembered what it felt like to be judged for everything except his talent. And all because he believed that merit should always triumph over money." The wine incident video didn't just go viral. It became a cultural moment. By the end of the week, it had been viewed over 100 million times across all platforms. News outlets picked it up. Opinion columnists wrote think pieces. It sparked conversations about privilege, racism, and meritocracy. The hashtag #WineGate trended for 5 straight days. But more interestingly, people started digging into the story. Journalists researched Dominic Hayes' background. They found the inspiring rags to riches story. They interviewed his former teachers, his students, people who knew him. And the narrative shifted from just rich kid pours wine on black man to entitled family tries to buy their way into institution that exists to combat exactly that kind of privilege. Articles appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN. The man who said no to $12 million, how Dominic Hayes is revolutionizing classical music education. Merit over money. Inside Thornhill Conservatory's radical approach to admissions. From Detroit to Manhattan. Dominic Hayes built an empire on principle and refuses to compromise. Dominic didn't seek any of this attention, didn't do interviews or press appearances, but the story spread anyway, and with it came support. Donations poured into Thornhill's scholarship fund from people who'd never heard of the school before, but admired what Dominic stood for. Small donations, $20 here, $50 there, thousands of them. Within 2 weeks, the scholarship fund had grown by $8 million. Not from wealthy families trying to buy influence, but from regular people who believed in the mission. Meanwhile, the Whitmore family was experiencing the opposite. The social consequences were immediate and brutal. Victoria's charity board positions, she was quietly asked to step down from 3 of them. Christopher's business deals, 2 major contracts fell through when partners cited reputation concerns. Ashton's college applications. 5 schools that had been considering him sent rejection letters. Their social circle. It evaporated. Invitations stopped coming. Calls went unreturned. People who'd been friends for years suddenly became unavailable. Because nobody wants to be associated with that family from the video. Nobody wants to be seen defending people who laughed while their son poured wine on a respected CEO. The Whitmores became social pariahs virtually overnight. Victoria stopped leaving the house, couldn't bear the stares and whispers when she went out. Christopher buried himself in work, trying to salvage business relationships that were crumbling. And Ashton spent his days reading the comments on the video. Hundreds of thousands of comments. Maybe millions at this point. Most of them were brutal. This is what entitlement looks like. I hope this kid never plays piano professionally. He doesn't deserve it. The mom laughing is almost worse than the kid. These people are disgusting. Dominic Hayes is a hero for staying composed. This is dignity defined. But some comments were different. I was that kid once. Not the wine pouring, but the entitled rich kid who thought the world owed me everything. It took me hitting rock bottom to change. Maybe this kid can learn. Everyone deserves a second chance, but they have to earn it. Actions have consequences. I hope he learns from this. I hope he becomes a better person. These comments gave Ashton something to think about. For the first time in his life, he had to confront who he actually was versus who he thought he was, and it was a painful reckoning. But the Whitmore family's downfall was just the beginning. The video and the story behind it sparked a larger conversation about admissions practices at elite institutions. Journalists started investigating. How many prestigious schools had development admits students admitted based on family donations rather than merit? How common was it for wealthy families to essentially buy their children's way into programs? What they found was shocking, but not surprising. At some elite conservatories and universities, up to 15% of admitted students came from families who'd made substantial donations. Students whose scores and qualifications fell below the usual standards, but who got in anyway because their parents could write a big check. The talent not money movement started. Students, teachers, and education advocates began pushing for transparency in admissions, demanding that schools publish data on how many students were admitted through standard criteria versus development exceptions. Several prestigious music programs were forced to defend their practices publicly. And under that scrutiny, some began to change. The Manhattan School of Music announced they were ending development admits and moving to a fully merit-based system. Juilliard, while not ending the practice, entirely committed to increased transparency and limitations on how much weight donations could carry. 3 major universities with prestigious music programs adopted Thornhill's model of blind auditions, where judges didn't know the applicant's background. It wasn't a complete revolution, but it was a start. And it all traced back to one video, one moment, one man's refusal to compromise. Dominic Hayes hadn't set out to change the entire system. He'd just built one school based on principles he believed in. But sometimes that's how change happens. One institution at a time. One decision at a time. One man standing up and saying, no, there's a better way, and proving it works. 6 months after the video went viral, here's where everyone ended up. Dominic Hayes and Thornhill Conservatory were thriving. Applications increased by 300%. Students from countries that had never sent applicants before started auditioning. The scholarship fund grew to $20 million, far more than the Whitmores had offered. And the incoming class, 40 students from 30 different countries. Every single one admitted purely on talent, including Kayla Morrison, who was excelling in her studies and had already won 2 competitions. Dominic was asked to speak at education conferences, to advise other institutions on merit-based admissions. He was offered book deals, documentary opportunities, speaking fees that would have made him wealthy beyond what his performing career ever did. He turned most of them down, because that wasn't why he built Thornhill. He just kept doing the work. Training students, maintaining standards, building a better system, one decision at a time. As for the Whitmore family, Christopher's business recovered somewhat. Not to its former heights, but enough that they weren't in financial trouble. Victoria slowly, carefully rebuilt some social connections, though she'd never regain her previous status. She'd learned something, though. She'd learned that status built on superficiality isn't worth much when it's tested. And Ashton took a year off. He got a regular job, worked at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. It was humbling, being just another barista, being someone who had to earn respect through his work rather than through his last name. But it was also clarifying. He still played piano, but differently now. Not because he was supposed to, not to maintain an image or fulfill his parents' expectations, but because he actually loved it. He started taking lessons from a teacher in Prospect Heights, a woman who didn't care who he was or what his family had done. She just cared if he practiced and if he brought genuine feeling to the music. And slowly, very slowly, Ashton started to improve. Not to the level of a Thornhill student. Maybe he'd never get there, but to a level where the music meant something, where it came from somewhere real inside him. 7 months after the video, Ashton did something unexpected. He wrote a letter to Dominic Hayes, not asking for admission, not asking for anything, just apologizing. Really apologizing, explaining what he'd learned, how he'd changed, what he was working on. I don't expect forgiveness, he wrote. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that what you said to me about needing to learn respect and humility and hard work, you were absolutely right. I'm trying to learn those things now. I'm trying to be better. Thank you for holding your ground. Thank you for showing me that there are things money can't buy and shouldn't buy. I understand now why Thornhill matters, why what you built matters. And I understand why I didn't deserve to be part of it. Dominic read the letter twice. Then he wrote back, Ashton, thank you for your letter. I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to reflect on what happened. Growth is possible for anyone who genuinely pursues it. Keep working. Keep playing. Do it because you love it, not because you think it will give you status. That's when real artistry emerges. I wish you well on your journey. Respectfully, Dominic Hayes. It wasn't absolution, but it was acknowledgement. And sometimes that's enough to keep someone moving in the right direction. So what's the lesson in all of this? What can we take away from this story of a man, a glass of wine, and a decision that changed multiple lives? First, that dignity costs nothing, but is worth everything. Dominic Hayes stood there with wine dripping from his clothes and chose not to retaliate. Not to match cruelty with cruelty. He chose dignity. And that dignity, that composure, gave him power that no amount of anger could have provided. Second, that principles matter most when they're expensive. It would have been easy for Dominic to accept the Whitmore's money. $12 million could have helped hundreds of students. But accepting it would have compromised everything Thornhill stood for. Principles aren't principles if you abandon them the moment they cost you something. Third, that privilege is not an achievement. Ashton Whitmore spent his whole life being told he was special talented, destined for greatness. But he'd never actually earned any of it. And when he finally faced a truly merit-based evaluation, he fell short. Privilege is not a substitute for actual ability. Money is not a substitute for actual work. Fourth, that systems can change. Dominic Hayes didn't just complain about the unfairness of classical music education, he built an alternative. And by proving that a merit-based system could work, could thrive, he inspired other institutions to reconsider their practices. Change doesn't happen by asking the powerful to be better. It happens by building better systems and proving they work. And finally, that everyone deserves a chance, but not everyone deserves the same chance. Kayla Morrison deserved Thornhill. She'd earned it through talent and dedication. Ashton Whitmore didn't deserve Thornhill. He hadn't earned it. That's not cruel. That's not unfair. That's justice. Real fairness isn't treating everyone the same. It's giving people what they've earned. Dominic Hayes understood that. And by holding to that standard, by refusing to compromise, he created opportunities for students who truly deserved them. Students like the one he'd been. Students who had the talent, but not the privilege. Students who just needed someone to give them a fair chance. So the next time you're tempted to judge someone by their appearance, by where they come from, by how much money they have, remember Dominic Hayes standing in that ballroom with wine on his suit. Remember that the person you're dismissing might be the most accomplished person in the room. Remember that dignity and respect should be universal, not conditional on status. And remember that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is not revenge. It's simply refusing to compromise your principles. That's how Dominic Hayes turned a moment of humiliation into a teaching moment for the world. That's how he proved that some things truly can't be bought. And that's how he ensured that Thornhill Conservatory would continue to be a place where talent real earned, demonstrated talent matters more than any amount of money. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how we judge people and how we evaluate worth, then share it. Share the message that dignity matters, that merit matters, that principles matter. Because the world needs more people like Dominic Hayes, people who stand up for what's right even when it's costly, people who build better systems instead of just complaining about broken ones, people who understand that true excellence can't be purchased, it can only be earned.